Chapter 593. The dragon blood baptism was very effective in improving one's physical fitness. If the dragon blood baptism was carried out 5 times, it could almost raise the physical fitness of an ordinary warrior or adventurer to the level of a legendary warrior. They would also have some magic abilities and various resistances. If it was a dragon bloodline warlock, the effects of the dragon blood baptism would be even better, and all kinds of spells would be improved. But there weren't many people who could complete the dragon blood baptism 5 times. After all, dragons weren't kobolds that could be casually killed. Moreover, there weren't many true dragons in material planes. The dragon blood baptism used was at least that of an adult dragon. At the same time, one had to resist the corrosion of the dragon blood during the dragon blood baptism. The dragon blood baptism did not improve a legendary warrior's physical fitness by much. It could only improve their toughness and elemental resistance by a small amount. However, although a legendary warrior's physical fitness was strong, they also had to master combat skills. If one wanted to rely on the dragon blood baptism ritual to quickly become a legendary warrior, this kind of trick would be exposed in front of a warrior who had experienced hundreds of battles. It could be said that the gains did not make up for the losses. Alex completed the floating ring in the afternoon after Hathaway left. The complete floating ring was a silver-white ring with a diameter of 5 meters. A large number of runes were engraved on the ring. The whole floating ring was constantly flashing. Even if there was no energy to activate it, the floating ring would still float in the air. Is this the floating ring? It's so beautiful. Xanthi blinked her big eyes and looked at the floating silver ring on the astrology platform. What a powerful rune circle. It's so exquisite. Karina looked at the floating ring in front of her and exclaimed. During this period, she had seen a lot of top-level wizard creations and paid more attention to wizard knowledge. Now, she was also spending a lot of time to improve her wizard level. After all, it was too difficult to rely on the bloodline ability of a warlock to become a legendary warrior. Although warlocks did not need to learn to cast spells, or materials, it was convenient and fast. It was easy to form combat power in the early stages. However, the potential of a warlock was limited. The bottleneck of most warlocks' growth was their bloodline. Only a very small number of geniuses could break free of the bloodline shackles. Of course, even if they knew this, many people still chose to become a warlock. After all, even with the bloodline restriction, most of the time, these warlocks could not even get close to the bloodline shackles. Many people couldn't even reach transcendent rank 4, not to mention legendary, in their entire lives. Therefore, the bloodline restrictions of warlocks were meaningless to them. After all, you're asking a bunch of people who can't even reach transcendent rank 4 to consider advancing to the legendary level? It was a complete waste of time. Although the Northwind Principality was located in the northern wasteland, it was still very hot during the summer. After all, the Northwind Principality was over 2,000 kilometers away from the northernmost tip of the continent. As for the Great Glacier and Icewind Valley, they were even further away. As the new pearl of the Northern Kingdoms, Northern Battlefront City was a famous trade city. Many caravans came and went every day. Who? This damned weather is too hot. Hadding raised his head and looked at the sun. He wiped the sweat off his forehead and looked at the caravan in front of him. This caravan came from the Kingdom of Hightar in the southwest. Ever since the Northwind Principality's goods appeared in the Kingdom of Hightar, it quickly swept through the entire kingdom. The goods here were highly sought after by the entire kingdom. The Hightar people were shorter than the northerners but taller than the southerners. Their skin was mostly light brown. Their bodies were well proportioned and more agile than the northerners. Of course, their strength was slightly inferior. Because the western part of the kingdom was close to the Desert of Death, half of the Kingdom of Hightar was barren and the land yield was not high. Therefore, many people in this country did business. Because of the barren land, many civilians became mercenaries in order to survive. This country's mercenaries were very famous in the Western continent. The High-Tar mercenaries had always been known for their loyalty and trustworthiness. Many of the High-Tar knights also swore loyalty to the nobles of other countries. Because the kingdom of High-Tar was barren and could not support too many knights, many of the knights in the kingdom of High-Tar would swear loyalty to the nobles of other countries. There were many such knights in the kingdom of Florence. Hadding was a High-Tar mercenary. He had followed the caravan to northern Battlefront City several times. Every time he came, he would be shocked by the roads and the city. The 6-meter-wide stone road was wide and flat. The city was clean and tidy. This was something that other cities did not have. Aside from that, there was also Beifeng dukedom's strict laws. Spitting and littering was punishable by death. There was also the city's taxes. Unlike other cities, Beifeng dukedom didn't have all kinds of taxes. Beifeng dukedom even had the urge to live here. The caravan moved forward slowly. Although many of the merchants were anxious, they could only line up obediently. As for cutting the line, no one dared to do anything. After all, if they dared to cause trouble here, they would lose the right to trade. Then, this trip would be equivalent to a wasted trip. Not many people could afford such a loss. Finally, it was the caravan's turn to enter the city. At the city gate, the tax officer carefully checked the goods and issued a certificate. The caravan slowly entered the city. As soon as they entered the city, the noisy atmosphere hit them in the face. Everyone relaxed as well. For the mercenaries, northern Battlefront City could be said to be very safe. Other cities had more or less gray forces, but there was no need to worry about that here. As long as they did not violate the rules, no one would come looking for trouble. After nearly 2 months on the road, he could not wait to go to the tavern to relax. Northern Battlefront City's wine was very popular. Guys, let's go quickly. I heard that Fiery Bird Tavern has a new batch of wine. Let's go try it today. The voice of a bearded dwarf sounded. On the street not far away, a group of dwarf craftsmen noisily walked towards the tavern. On the other side of the street, a few gnomes looked at the noisy dwarves with disgust. Clearly, they were annoyed by the noise. A group of children rushed out from an alley and quickly shuttled through the crowd. The entire city was thriving. Should I get the reward for this mission and buy a house here? Hadding thought to himself. Rumble. Suddenly, the ground shook violently. Then, a loud sound spread throughout the city. People on the noisy street asked in panic. What's going on? Is someone attacking the city? Is there an earthquake? A large number of people ran to the street to look. At this moment, there was a cry of surprise. Look, what's that? Heavens! Is this a miracle? It's flying. In the center of the city, the symbol of Northern Battlefront City, the Northwind Tower, rose slowly under the shocked gazes of countless people. Northwind Tower, on the astrology platform. Hathaway floated in the air. In front of her was a three-dimensional model of the Wizard Tower and Northern Battlefront City. A large number of data appeared on the projection. The situation of the entire city was projected by the Wizard Tower. Milky Way. Scan the Wizard Tower. Check the tower's structural strength. Scan completed. Wizard Tower operating normally, no abnormalities in the tower's structure. Begin separation of the tower. Increase the energy output of the elemental furnace. Prepare to take off. Boom! Powerful energy gushed out of the elemental furnace and entered the floating ring. The entire Wizard Tower shook slightly. A strong wave of energy spread out from the Wizard Tower. Wizard Tower operating normally. Energy transmission normal. Floating ring operating normally. Energy channel operating normally. In the Wizard Tower, the nodes representing the energy channels lit up one by one. The energy channels of the Wizard Tower were activated. Under the control of Milky Way, the connecting metal structures at the bottom of the wizard tower began to separate. All connecting structures in the first area have been separated. All connecting structures in the second area have been separated. All connecting structures in the central area have been separated. On the three-dimensional image, the red dots representing the connecting structures all turned green. The wizard tower was completely separated from the ground. Energy output of the elemental furnace is stable. Activate the floating ring. In the center of the first floor of the wizard tower, a silver ring with a diameter of 5 meters slowly rotated. Countless runes lit up on the ring. A powerful energy flowed into the floating ring. The entire floating ring shone with a dazzling light. Kaboom! A huge vibration was heard. The wizard tower trembled violently. Then, this giant structure that was more than 100 meters tall and 500 meters wide slowly rose into the air. It's flying! It's really flying! Karina shouted excitedly. It's incredible! It's really flying! It's like the power of God. Grace was shocked. Phyllis and Sandy were so excited that they couldn't speak. They looked at Sulen and Hathaway with admiration. The other wizards in the wizard tower were also shocked. This time, they were full of awe. The floating space tower rose slowly. As the floating space tower rose, a gust of wind swept around the floating space tower. Soon, this giant structure that weighed thousands of tons continued to rise. The whole city was getting smaller and smaller in everyone's eyes. Milky Way, report the status of the wizard tower. Energy supply normal. The structure of the wizard tower is normal. Energy operation normal. The wizard tower rose faster and faster. In just a few minutes, it rose 3,000 meters. The wind was howling, but the wizard tower didn't shake at all. The wizard tower's exterior was also blocked by the wind. Although it was thousands of meters high, the environment in the wizard tower was no different from the ground. Activate the star map to determine the location of the wizard tower. The wizard tower is officially undergoing flight test. Chapter 594. On the astrology platform, a beam of light rose, and in the next second, a three-dimensional model of the entire Tyrol world appeared in mid-air. The huge planet rotated slowly, and the continents, oceans, mountains, rivers, forests, and lakes were all marked out. Even the major cities of various countries were marked out. The information was collected by Sulen and Hathaway and transmitted to the tower spirit, Milky Way. Milky Way then integrated the information and the three-dimensional map of the Tyrol world to generate the current star map. Of course, the data on the star map was not 100% accurate. After all, there was no internet in this world, and there were no satellites, so it could not be updated in real time. Many of the information was collected in the past, so it could not be updated in real time. Even so, the star map was enough for now. At this time, on the star map, the light spots representing the wizard tower were constantly flashing. Sulen gently tapped on the star map, and the star map was instantly enlarged. The topographic map of the surrounding area of North City appeared in front of them. Sulen directly marked the location on the star map, and then let the tower spirit operate the floating space tower to move to the target location. The floating space tower moved quickly in the air and soon appeared at the predetermined location. Then, Sulen began a comprehensive test of the floating space tower's flight ability, and whether there were any problems with the structure of the tower during the flight. 2 hours later, the floating space tower completed all the tests, and then returned to North City and began to land slowly. Arrived at the predetermined location. No abnormalities on the ground. Preparing for landing. Starting the balancer system. After Sulen gave the order, the tower spirit, Milky Way, operated the wizard tower to land slowly. Finally, after a slight shake, the floating space tower once again landed in its original position. The floating space tower's base structure was still a bit shabby. After further upgrades, the wizard tower would be equipped with a large number of auxiliary tools to ensure that the wizard tower could land smoothly under any circumstances. Landing successful. The floating space ring is closed. As the wizard tower landed, the voice of the tower spirit, Milky Way, sounded again. Success. Hathaway cheered excitedly as the voice of the tower spirit, Milky Way, faded away. That's great. We did it. This is our floating space tower. Chrissy, Karina, Alex, Sandy, Phyllis, and all the others in Northwind Tower cheered excitedly. In this era, the floating space tower was only built by the top wizard organizations based on their strength. The floating space tower was not just for show. Before the floating space city, the floating space tower was the wizard's most powerful trump card and the wizard's most powerful battle fortress. The floating space tower has been successfully constructed. There will be a celebratory banquet tonight. Everyone must attend. After a moment of commotion, Sulen was in a very good mood. After hugging Hathaway, Chris, and the others, he announced directly. No problem. Awesome. After hearing Sullen's decision, everyone agreed. Hathaway, Alex, we have to make some minor adjustments to the floating space tower, Sulen said with a smile as he looked at the noisy crowd in front of him. Don't worry, the floating space tower is basically completed. The remaining adjustments will be completed later, Hathaway said softly. The tower's spirit has just recorded the data when the elemental furnace was operating. We will also need to make adjustments when the time comes. It had been 3 years since the establishment of Northwind Tower. The original wizard tower had finally become a floating space tower. In addition to a lot of manpower and material resources, it also consumed a lot of energy. So far, a rough calculation showed that the floating space tower had cost about 300 million kinars. Many of the precious materials were found by Sulen and Hathaway through various methods. It could not be measured by money. If it were not for the rich mineral resources in the underground world and the large amount of resources in the secret realm of Northern Town, the completion of the floating space tower would still be a long time away. Even if they spent 300 million kinar, there were still many aspects of the floating space tower that needed to be improved, such as the ecosystem and the gravity system in the floating space tower. Sullen's floating space tower could enter the astral world, but the astral world had no air, no water, and no gravity. Although it was protected by the Enigma barrier, it was still troublesome for others. Next, the floating space tower needed to be built with a series of supporting facilities. Although these facilities were not necessary, they were expensive to build. The Enigma barrier also needed to be improved, which would cost more money. Master, where will the banquet be held tonight? I'll inform Frodo to prepare now, Chris said excitedly. Frodo, the halfling, was very skilled. In the past 2 years, Sulen had basically used up all the ingredients in his stomach, and his cooking had become better and better. Sulen felt that if the halfling held a cooking competition, he would definitely win the championship. Let Frodo prepare a sumptuous meal, Sulen said with a smile. The news of the floating space tower in North City spread like a whirlwind across the continent. As a commercial city, North City had a large number of merchants coming and going every day. It could be said that there were caravans from all over the continent. When the floating space tower rose into the sky, it made such a big noise that the entire city could see it clearly. After the floating space tower rose into the sky, these merchants and various churches had already spread the news in all directions. The news of the floating space tower in North City shocked many kingdoms and wizard organizations. Originally, the rise of the Beifeng Principality had already caused many people to raise their eyebrows. In just 5 years, they had successfully opened up a territory in the northern wasteland, and finally established a principality. This was something that even a kingdom would not be able to accomplish easily. But Su Luan had easily accomplished it, which made many countries fear him. Now, he had built a floating space tower quietly. Only a few large wizard organizations on the continent had floating space towers. The Duchy of North Wind could be said to have become a first-class force on the continent. The major temples and churches were also surprised by Sullen's strength. Although his importance had been raised many times, they did not expect that they still underestimated him. They became more cautious when it came to matters involving the Kingdom of Florence and the Duchy of North Wind. Sullen was naturally clear about the movements of the outside world. This time, he carried out the flight test with great fanfare on purpose. He wanted to show off his strength to the outside world in this way. After the floating space tower in North City, it had a great strategic deterrent force. In the past, several surrounding kingdoms coveted the Kingdom of Florence and secretly played tricks to provoke wars. But since then, they should consider how to resist the Kingdom of Florence. Due to the successful construction of the floating space tower, the North Wind Tower and the North Wind Academy had also become popular. Originally, those wizard organizations looked down on the North Wind Academy, which had only been established for 3 years. Although the legendary wizard Hathaway was there, its foundation was too weak. Compared with other wizard organizations that had been around for hundreds and thousands of years, the number of wizards and the variety of knowledge collected was far inferior. Therefore, when the North Wind Academy wanted to have some knowledge exchange with other wizard academies, it was not valued and was directly rejected. Now that the North Wind Tower had become a floating space tower, there were many wizard academies who wanted to have an exchange with the North Wind Tower. The goal of these wizard academies was very clear. They wanted to get some knowledge about the floating space tower. The floating space tower was a top-level war fortress that could not be built by just anyone. Even legendary wizards did not have floating space towers. After all, the technology of building floating space towers was only in the hands of a few wizard organizations. This technology could be said to be the secret of every wizard organization. Basically, it would not be spread outside. Even if some sorcerer organizations were willing to sell it, they would have to pay a very high price. After all, this kind of thing was equivalent to a nuclear weapon in his previous life, and it was no joke. Of course, those large sorcerer organizations would also use this knowledge to tempt some legendary sorcerers to join them. After the North Town had the floating space tower, those wizard organizations also wanted to pay some price to get information about the floating space tower from them. It was not that the information about the floating space tower could not be sold, but it was impossible to get it without paying a sufficient price. Moreover, Sullen did not intend to sell the elemental furnace. Although the energy provided by the elemental pool was not as good as that of the elemental fission furnace, it was barely enough to support a floating space tower. It was important to note that the wizard tower that had killed the abomination used the elemental pool as its energy source. The North Wind Tower in the North Town used the elemental furnace, which made the floating space tower qualified to travel in the astral world. To enter the astral world, it required a lot of energy, and ordinary elemental pools could not provide it at all. The floating space tower needed to maintain the ecosystem, gravity system, and other auxiliary facilities, which consumed a lot of energy. Ordinary wizard towers only needed to move in the material plane. They did not need the ecosystem, gravity system, and so on, so the energy consumed was greatly reduced. After the wizard tower that used the elemental pool was full of energy, it could also support the floating space tower to fight. Of course, this kind of wizard tower's endurance was limited. According to the current standard of the North Wind Tower, it could fight for a day after it was full of energy, and it could release the magic energy particle railgun 8 to 10 times. Because the floating space tower's puzzle used a single elemental pool, the opening of the puzzle did not affect the endurance of the elemental pool. If one wanted to prolong the combat time, one could also consider reducing the size of the floating space tower. The North Wind Tower in the North Town was built according to the top wizard tower. Lowering one standard and reducing the floating space tower to a height of 100 meters, the same elemental pool could increase the endurance of the floating space tower by about half. Of course, the power would be reduced correspondingly, but it was enough for a floating space tower in the main material plane. Chapter 595. Whether it was the floating space ring technology, the Enigma technology, or other technologies in the Wizard Tower, one had to pay a high price to obtain them. There were only a few wizard organizations that were qualified to exchange for them. Even so, it was enough for Su Lin to make a lot of profits and add some strength to the construction of the floating space city. The northern town had become more prosperous. The existence of the floating space tower made the place even more dazzling. Seizing the opportunity, the North Wind Academy also spread the news that they were recruiting wizard apprentices. For a time, the nobles of several surrounding countries brought their children to the northern town. The North Wind Tower had always been short of manpower. The manpower referred to wizards. Su Lin had less than 10 wizards under his command. After all, wizards needed a lot of time to grow. However, there were 20 or 30 wizard apprentices. If the harpies under Alex had not been promoted to winged people and could act as some low-level wizards, the North Wind Tower would have been in a more difficult situation. These winged people were basically bloodline warlocks. However, after becoming winged people, their intelligence was the same as that of humans. They could try to learn spells, but there were not many winged people who could become wizards in the end. These winged people who succeeded in becoming wizards would become the elites of the winged people. Since Alex merged with divinity and became a legend, the energy radiation around her body had become stronger. As the queen of the harpies, her bloodline radiation could make low-level harpies evolve from harpies to winged people. Now that this power had become stronger, the number of harpies who had successfully become winged people increased again. Now, the number of winged people in the northern town had reached more than 200. More than 200 bloodline warlocks. Although their levels were not high, they were still a very powerful force. The emergence of these winged people finally relieved some of the shortage of manpower. Now, the secret realm in the northern town was basically taken care of by these winged people. Su Lin and Hathaway had studied the Harpies' bloodline. To be honest, the Harpies' bloodline that originated from the god of wind had almost completely disappeared. The Harpies' bloodline was mixed with a lot of other bloodlines. Without Alex, the Harpies' bloodline would continue to degenerate. In the end, their intelligence would degenerate to a level higher than that of beasts. Alex's bloodline power could prevent these harpies from degenerating and even slowly evolving. However, there was a limit to this kind of evolution. Most harpies were unable to become winged people. Unless Alex became even more powerful and his bloodline evolved to that of a demigod. In the secret territory of Northern Guard City, Su Lin took a moment to enjoy his afternoon tea in his treehouse. When the breeze blew, the fragrance of flowers floated over. The sun shone on her body, making her feel warm and comfortable. Su Lin, stop sleeping. Go and take a look at the wisdom tree. At this moment, Phyllis ran over and grabbed Sulin's arm and shook it. What's wrong? Su Lin, who was a little sleepy, immediately woke up. Phyllis said excitedly, the wisdom tree has borne fruit. Su Lin was taken aback for a moment before he replied, all right, I'll head over right now. With that, he got up and quickly followed Phyllis to the botanical garden. From afar, Su Lin could see the wisdom tree's towering crown. The aura of nature in the surroundings was even thicker. After arriving here, the surroundings were shrouded in a rich life force. The aura of nature around the wisdom tree had become even stronger. Soon, Su Lin arrived at the wisdom tree's surroundings. The tall wisdom tree was lush with leaves and branches. On the branches, Su Lin saw some round objects that looked like fruits. Su Lin, look, those are the fruits. Sandy pulled Su Lin excitedly and pointed at the fruits on the wisdom tree's branches with her other hand. The fruits looked like they were about the size of coconuts. They were perfectly round and green in color. There weren't many fruits. They were scattered around and grew sparsely. There were about 100 of them. They didn't look like anything special, but Sulan also discovered that these fruits seemed to contain an aura of life. These are the fruits of the wisdom tree? Sulan looked at the fruits in front of him strangely. He didn't know that the wisdom tree could bear fruit. Sulan, do you think the fruits of the wisdom tree should be called the wisdom fruit? Phyllis whispered. Will eating one make me smarter? Sulan rolled his eyes at her and said, I've never eaten the fruits of the wisdom tree. How would I know what they're used for? Also, I've never heard of such a thing. But I guess eating the fruits of the wisdom tree won't increase one's intelligence. Should we pick one to try? Chris waved her whip, looking eager to give it a try. Sulan quickly stopped her and said, Don't. These fruits don't look ripe yet. If they don't have any effect, it would be a waste. All right. Chris shrugged. It looks like these fruits still need some time to ripen. Let's wait for them to grow slowly, Sulan said directly. When did you find these fruits? They appeared this morning, Sandy gestured. Sandy gestured with her hands. In the beginning, these fruits were only the size of walnuts. I thought they were just tree burls. But soon, these fruits began to grow. By the afternoon, they had grown to their current size. So fast? Sulan looked at the wisdom tree in front of him in shock. At this rate, it was very likely that it would ripen today. Then let's wait and see. Next, everyone waited under the wisdom tree for the fruits to ripen. As time passed, the surrounding nature power became denser, and the life energy in the fruits slowly increased. After waiting for about 2 hours, it was close to evening. The fruits of the wisdom tree were finally about to ripen. The life energy in the fruits of the wisdom tree didn't increase anymore, and the color of the fruits changed from green to yellow. At this moment, there was a cracking sound that sounded like an eggshell cracking. In the next second, a crack appeared on the hard and smooth outer shell of the fruit. With the cracking sound, the crack on the fruit became bigger and bigger. Finally, after a few minutes, the hard outer shell completely fell off. The outer shell of the fruit fell off, and a blue flower slowly bloomed inside. Seeing that these fruits were actually flowers, Sulan felt a little strange. At this moment, the flower completely bloomed. It was very beautiful, but at this moment, no one paid attention to the flower. After the flower completely bloomed, a palm-sized person slowly woke up in the center of the flower. This little person was about 10 centimeters tall and had an exquisite appearance. She had green hair and wore an exquisite blue dress. There was also a pair of translucent wings on her back. Her body was slender and her skin was white and tender. She wore boots that seemed to be woven from tree vines. Exquisite and cute, she looked like a miniature version of a stunning beauty. After the flower completely bloomed, this little beauty woke up from her sleep. After yawning, she slowly opened her eyes. However, when she looked up and saw the crowd, she was so scared that she immediately hid behind the flower petals. Is this a fairy? Phyllis said in surprise. It should be a flower fairy. Sandy said with uncertainty. This is born from the wisdom tree. It should be called a tree fairy. Chris said. Sulan looked at the little guy who was hiding in shock. He was also surprised that the wisdom tree could give birth to such a life. This is a flower fairy, but it can also be called a tree fairy, Hathaway said excitedly. I didn't expect the wisdom tree to give birth to such a miraculous life. Flower fairies were favored by nature. They were born beautiful and usually lived in forests with excellent environments. They were born timid and not very strong, but they were born with some nature spells. There used to be many of them in the forests of material planes. However, as humans hunted and killed these creatures, the number of flower fairies decreased greatly. They were almost extinct. Flower fairies were born with luck. Some wizards would kill them in a special way after catching them and obtaining large amounts of fairy dust. This fairy dust contained the power of luck and could increase the success rate of making various potions and magic items. There were also some humans who liked these flower fairies and spent a lot of money to hire people to capture them and keep them in cages as pets. For a period of time, many noble ladies were proud to own a flower fairy. "I didn't expect the wisdom tree to give birth to a flower fairy," Su Len said in surprise. Flower fairies often appeared as companion creatures. Sometimes, they would appear around some ancient trees. They could speed up their growth and reduce pests and diseases. They could also collect pollen and make honey. The trees would also provide them with protection. Su Len appraised the flower fairies in front of him. A spiritual light spread out. Although the flower fairies hid, the appraisal skill still showed the result. Target: flower fairy, tree fairy, fairy. Race: fairy danger level, low skills, vine entanglement, illusion, invisibility talents. Nature bloodline, hide challenge level, 5. These flower fairies weren't very strong, but their survival ability in the forest was still very strong. Although they didn't have great strength, as long as they hid in the wild, it was very difficult to find them. Even wizards couldn't find them. Flower fairies usually lived with trees. They were also called tree fairies. They were a mystical companion race. At this time, other than the flower fairy in front of him, the rest of the fruits on the wisdom tree also began to crack. Sounds like eggshells cracking were heard. Soon, flower fairies were born one after another. Chapter 596. Roughly an hour later, over 100 flower fairies surrounded the wisdom tree. These flower fairies hid behind the foliage, clearly wary of Sullen's group. On the other hand, Xanthi got along quite well with them. Perhaps her natural fairy bloodline was taking effect. Seeing this situation, Su Len allowed Xanthi to interact with the flower fairies. As for refining these flower fairies into fairy dust, Su Len wasn't that perverted. These flower spirits were nurtured by the wisdom tree. They were most likely used to take care of the wisdom tree. Moreover, these flower spirits could make a special 100-flower honey. They were quite pretty, so it was fine to let them live here. They could also take care of the demonized plants in the secret land. It was killing 2 birds with 1 stone. These flower fairies were basically Tier 1 creatures. Although they looked small and cute, they were still very strong to ordinary people. Most flower fairies wouldn't change from the moment they were born. Only a small portion of them would grow stronger with the passage of time. If a flower fairy queen was born from these flower fairies, she would be Tier 3 at the very least. If she was lucky enough, she might even reach the mythic tier. However, the chances of that happening were very low. At the same time, it would take a long time for her to reach the mythic tier. After making arrangements for the flower fairy, Su Luan left the secret realm. There were still a lot of resources in his storage space that he hadn't finished dealing with. He had obtained a lot of white dragon meat from killing the white dragon last time. Su Luan wasn't about to let go of the dragon meat. White dragon meat wasn't something that just anyone could eat. According to the legends of his previous life, white dragon meat should be cold, or it should be cold poison. If one didn't have the corresponding ingredients, eating it would kill them. Of course, if one's physique exceeded 20 points, eating some white dragon meat wouldn't be a problem. According to Sullen's plan, the white dragon meat would be turned into dragon breast. The dragon breast was easy to preserve and tasted good. The meat of various demonic beasts in this world could more or less increase one's physique. Some special demonic beasts could even increase other abilities. Hence, demonic beast meat was very popular. However, although the demonic beast meat could increase attributes, it would lose its effect after repeated consumption. Moreover, the increase in attributes of the demonic beast meat was related to the original attributes of the demonic beast. The maximum attributes would not exceed the original attributes of the demonic beast. Therefore, it was impossible to rely on eating demonic beast meat to become invincible. There were also people in this world who had specially experimented and organized the eating of magical beast meat, and left behind a book called Magical Beast Mountain and Sea Scroll, which recorded the living habits of thousands of magical beasts in the entire Tyrant world, their living environment, their strength, preferences, and so on. In addition, there were also the customs of the world, famous mountains and rivers, geographical phenomena, local specialties, and so on. At the same time, he also recorded the cooking methods of these magical beasts, as well as what supplementary ingredients were added to remove the poison or improve the effects. It could be said that this book was all-encompassing and was called a geographical encyclopedia. Of course, some people called it a geographical cookbook. However, although this book was widely circulated, most of it was incomplete. Su Lan did not have a complete book in his hands, and this had always been a regret in his heart. The preparation of dragon breast was very simple. Su Lan had done this before. All kinds of seasonings were prepared, and then it was time to cook. In order to make the dragon breast taste better, Su Lan specially called the halfling human chef Frodo to help. "Oh my God, is this a dragon?" Frodo was shocked when he saw the white dragon corpses piled up on the platform. "I never thought that there would be a day when I would use dragon meat to cook. I have decided that I must record today's events. When I retire, I will write an autobiography for myself," Frodo said while dancing with joy. "How is it? Can you handle the dragon meat well?" Su Lan said with a smile. Frodo circled around the dragon and said without raising his head, "Don't worry, I won't go wrong." "That's good. I'll leave it to you." Su Lan directly handed the task of processing the dragon meat and making dragon breast to Frodo. "No problem. I was just about to study dragon meat." Frodo's eyes lit up. He looked at the white dragon corpse in front of him as if he was looking at a great beauty. He could not wait to cut it with his knife, but as soon as he started, he was stunned. The knife in his hand could not pierce the dragon's scales and skin. Although Frodo was a grade 3 rogue and had good strength, he was in a difficult position when facing a dragon with thick skin. Halflings were born agile, but they lacked strength. Even a grade 3 rogue's strength was limited. Even a grade 3 warrior might not be able to pierce the dragon's scales and skin with full strength, let alone a halfling. Thus, an awkward scene appeared. Frodo held his knife but could not cut the dragon's meat. Looking at Frodo's darkened face, Su Lan held back his laughter and called a few barbarian warriors to help. He asked them to separate the dragon's skin and flesh. With the help of a few barbarian warriors, the white dragon's skin was quickly separated. Except for some that were not suitable for making dragon robes, the rest were left for Hathaway to process. In addition, Su Lan extracted all the dragon's blood. The lowest quality dragon blood was used to make dragon blood ink, which could be used to make magic scrolls. The better quality dragon blood could be used to make dragon blood potions or other ingredients for potions. As for the best quality dragon blood, it could be used to make dragon blood potions or for dragon blood baptism. Su Lan divided all the dragon blood according to its quality and then stored the white dragon's heart. This dragon's heart was a precious material that could be used by Hathaway. He then picked up a crystal ball in his hand. The crystal ball was red. It contained the dragon blood that Su Lan had just extracted. The dragon blood did not seem to be much, but it was the most precious blood in a white dragon. Su Lan planned to use this dragon blood to give Phyllis a dragon blood baptism. The amount of dragon blood was only enough for one person. Su Lan put away the dragon blood and then went to check on Frodo's work. As soon as he arrived, Su Lan smelled a tempting scent. He looked up and saw a dozen large stoves on the platform. Large iron pots were placed on top of them. White dragon meat was simmering inside. The dark red soup kept boiling, and the dragon meat kept rising and falling. Frodo was stirring in one of the pots and adding all kinds of spices. From time to time, he would use a small spoon to scoop up some to taste. "Frodo, how's the preparation?" Sulen asked as he came to his side. "It's almost done," Frodo said. "The large dragon heads have been turned into dragon meat. I've also cooked the small dragon heads and those that are not suitable for dragon meat. Look, this is fried dragon meat with scallions, this is braised dragon meat, and this is crispy dragon tenderloin." Frodo came to another table. There were more than a dozen plates on the table, and all of them were covered with lids. Frodo picked up a few of the lids and introduced them to Frodo. As soon as he opened the lids, Sulen immediately smelled the aroma that was far more delicious than before. It kept stirring his stomach. The cooked food was kept in special utensils. As long as the lids were closed, they could be kept for a long time. North Town Palace. During this time, the North Town Palace was very lively. Sullen's women were all there. It was the Harvest Festival in North Town. There were 3 biggest festivals in North Wind Principality. The first was the founding of the nation, the second was the Harvest Festival, and the third was the New Year. As for the other festivals, Sulen was not interested in them, so he did not pay much attention to them. Other countries had fewer festivals. Usually, it was the king's birthday or the national day. The Holy Church had many festivals, such as the Holy Birthday Day, Holy Sacrifice Day, and so on. However, these festivals were usually only celebrated within the church. Every country in the world was wary of the church. After all, the Holy Kingdom of Light had been a lesson. The kings of every country did not want to be replaced by the Holy Church. After seeing Frodo's delicious dishes, he decided to hold a banquet. After returning to the palace, he sent someone to inform the others. Then, he went back to the Hidden Realm to check on Xanthi's homework. As the weakest and the youngest among the girls, Sulen needed to supervise her. Xanthi was very hard-working. She was very cooperative with Sulen's teaching. She even had a real battle practice. Of course, Xanthi was defeated in the end. However, this was normal. It did not matter if she lost. She could learn more from him in the future. When she was familiar with the skills, her combat power would naturally increase. After a battle, Xanthi surrendered. In the end, she was led to the palace by Sulen. At this time, the palace was already brightly lit. A large group of maids were busy preparing the banquet. After Sulen gave the order, the maids went to prepare. As the chief steward of the palace, Annie was preparing all kinds of delicious food. She took out the most precious wine from the wine cellar. Of course, these were all non-staple foods. The main dish was still the dragon meat banquet prepared by Frodo. Everyone liked Frodo's dragon meat banquet. Soon, the sumptuous dragon meat banquet was served. 2 hours later, the sumptuous dragon meat banquet was over. After eating, Sulen got up and went upstairs. He whispered in Phyllis's ear, "Come to my room after you take a bath tonight." Phyllis's pretty face instantly turned bright red. Her white jade-like ears were like cooked prawns. Although Sulen's voice was very low, the people at the table were not ordinary people. They had sharp senses. Naturally, they heard Sulen's words clearly. They all looked at Phyllis with teasing and flirtatious eyes. But soon, Sulen got up and said to the others, "You can't run away. Remember to come tonight." White dragon meat was cold in nature. It tasted great and was very nutritious. However, there was also a problem. It had some side effects. People could not stand without eating it. Chapter 597. Inside the room, Phyllis had already cleaned herself up. She was wearing a pink princess dress with a low cut. She was wearing a pair of black silk stockings on her slim legs. She looked so pure and sexy. She looked very charming under the dim light. Sulen's eyes lit up when he saw Phyllis's outfit. He liked it very much, and he couldn't help but want to have a good relationship with her. However, when he thought about the dragon blood baptism, Su Len suppressed the thought. He was going to do it after the dragon blood baptism. Phyllis, stand here. Su Len waved his hand. Phyllis obediently walked over, but her breathing became a little rapid. Hold my hand. Su Len reached out his hand. A soft and delicate hand reached out. Her fingers were white and slender, and her nails were painted red. The white jade hand and the red dots made her look very beautiful. Su Len felt a layer of calluses on her hand. It seemed like Phyllis didn't waste her bloodline. She often practiced with her sword and martial arts. The power of thunder and lightning in Su Luan's body moved slightly, and then entered Phyllis's body through his palm. Phyllis's palm was slightly numb, and then a bolt of thunder and lightning quickly entered her body. Phyllis couldn't help but shiver. After the lightning energy entered Phyllis's body, it began to circulate in her body. After a while, Su Len opened his eyes in disappointment. Phyllis's dragon blood concentration wasn't high. Among the dragon blood wizards, this concentration was only below average. No wonder Phyllis's strength didn't increase quickly, and the awakening of her dragon bloodline talent was a little slow. After awakening a dragon bloodline, the first thing one would awaken was dragon strength, followed by dragon scale armor and dragon's breath. As one's strength increased, these abilities would also improve step by step. Aside from these, after a dragon bloodline warlock reached a certain level of strength, they would also awaken dragon's constitution, which would greatly increase their vitality. When a dragon bloodline warlock reached tier 4, they would grow a pair of dragon's wings. With dragon wings, a dragon bloodline warlock's flying ability would be improved, and their aerial combat ability would be strengthened. When they reached the legendary level, dragon bloodline warlocks would become half-dragon, which would greatly increase the dragon bloodline warlock's various body resistances. They would also be immune to sleep, paralysis, fire, according to the color of the dragon, and so on. Dragon bloodline warlocks not only had powerful spells, but they also had martial skills that were not inferior to warriors. It could be said that they were very powerful. Under the dim light, Su Len loosened his grip on Phyllis's slender hand, and his mind raced. He needed to make adjustments during the dragon blood baptism according to the density of Phyllis's dragon blood so that she could better absorb the power of the dragon blood. Turn around. Soon, Su Len had finished calculating the distribution ratio. He directly said to Phyllis, "Take off your clothes too. What kind of trick are you thinking of now?" Hearing Sullen's words, Phyllis's pretty face turned crimson, and her charming big eyes rolled at him flirtatiously. Su Len reached out and knocked on her head, and said, "What are you thinking? I'm going to give you a dragon blood baptism." Ah! Hearing Sullen's words, Phyllis's already crimson face turned even redder. She instantly realized that she had misunderstood and wanted to find a hole to hide in. It took her a while to recover. Holding back her embarrassment, Phyllis gave Su Len a fierce glare, and then turned around. She gently raised her slender arm, took a deep breath, and moved her fingers slightly. She unbuttoned her long dress, and then slightly lowered her shoulders. The beautiful princess dress slid down her body, and a fair back that was like white jade appeared in front of Sullen's eyes. With such a beautiful back, it would be a pity if he didn't take out the fire pot. Looking at Phyllis's back that was as smooth as jade, Su Len suddenly had an idea. The loose princess dress slid down her smooth back, and soon revealed her slender waist. Then, it slid down her perky buttocks that were like full moons. This portrait of beauty made Su Len so angry that he almost couldn't help but take Phyllis on the spot. Feeling the scorching gaze behind her, Phyllis smiled in her heart, and then slightly turned back to smile at Su Len. Sullen's breathing immediately quickened, and it took him a lot of effort to calm down. Knowing that this was a small revenge from Phyllis for his behavior just now, Su Len collected his thoughts, took a deep breath, and then took out a crystal ball from the storage space. The dragon blood baptism is a little painful, bear with it. Su Len said to Phyllis, and then took out a magic staff. Since the wizard level reached the legendary level, Su Len also asked Hathaway to prepare a magic staff for him. But unlike other people's magic staffs, Sullen's magic staff was made of pure metal, and a lot of runes were engraved on it. Not only could it be used to cast spells, but it could also be used to directly hit people in an emergency. A fist-sized magic gem was inlaid at the top of the magic staff, and it was specially blessed with the effects of crush, heavy strike, armor shatter, and so on. With a bang, a person's head would be directly smashed into pieces, and red and white matter would splatter everywhere. It was very exciting. Su Len gently waved the magic staff, and a strange force surrounded him. The crystal ball in his hand slowly flew up, and then a ray of light flew by. The outer layer of the crystal ball slowly melted, and soon, the red dragon blood stored inside was exposed. The white dragon blood contained a strong cold aura. As soon as it came in contact with the seal, the coldness in the blood was immediately exposed. The red dragon blood did not have a high resistance to cold, and when it felt the coldness, its body could not help but shiver. "Bear with it, I'm going to start." "I'm ready, let's start." Phyllis gritted her teeth and said. The temperature in the room dropped rapidly, and soon, some white frost appeared on the ground. Phyllis only felt a bone-piercing coldness shrouding her, and a layer of goosebumps appeared on her back, which was as smooth as jade. The dragon bloodline implant was implanted from the spine, which was the most important bone in the human body. The dragon bloodline would then spread from the spine to the surrounding bones. The dragon bloodline would merge with the bone marrow in the human body, and then the human bone marrow would also have the ability to create dragon blood. Of course, this dragon blood was not real dragon blood, but the blood of a dragon bloodline wizard. Su Len gently waved the magic staff, and a thin red line flew out from the floating dragon blood and slowly approached Phyllis's body. As soon as the cold dragon blood touched Phyllis's body, a bone-piercing coldness shrouded her, and her back felt like it was frozen. What followed was a sharp pain. The white dragon blood was not only bone-piercing coldness, it was also very corrosive. If one did not have the help of a wizard or a special dragon blood ritual circle, they could directly pour the dragon blood on their body. Although this method would still allow them to be baptized by the dragon blood, if they were not careful, it would not be strange if they could not withstand the corrosive power of the dragon blood and directly die. This method was usually only used by warriors or knights who were strong enough and had a high enough constitution. If a normal person did this, it would be suicide. Although Phyllis was already a dragon bloodline wizard, her constitution and resistance were still not enough to withstand it. Su Len used the dragon blood ritual circle to baptize her, and the corrosive power of the dragon blood was reduced by a lot. Although it was painful, it was not unbearable. Because of the bone-piercing coldness in the dragon blood, Phyllis's entire back was soon numb and she could not feel anything. "Bear with it," Su Len said softly when he saw Phyllis's painful expression, and his hands moved even faster. One rune after another appeared on Phyllis's back, and under the effect of a surge of mana, they merged with Phyllis's body. Wisps of bloodline power slowly merged into her bones and merged with her original bloodline. Phyllis's bones were also constantly strengthened. The dragon wing bone on her back, which was not obvious at first, was also rapidly growing. The dragon wing bone was a special bone that all dragon bloodline wizards would grow. It grew directly on the spine, and when a dragon bloodline wizard became strong enough, a pair of dragon wings would grow out from it. Su Len waved his magic staff, and some arcane dust slowly merged with the dragon blood. Then, the arcane dust slowly entered Phyllis's spine from the back of her head, and a chill went deep into her bones. Then, under Sullen's command, a large amount of thunder energy condensed into runes and merged with Phyllis's body. When all the runes had merged with her body, Su Len stopped. Then, he began to chant a spell, and the surrounding magic light gathered. A powerful force entered Phyllis's body and accelerated the merging of the dragon blood. The powerful energy filled the entire room. Su Len gently pointed his magic staff, and a beam of light rose up. Dragon Blood Ritual. Immediately, a large number of dragon blood runes appeared on the surface of Phyllis's body, and the bone-chilling cold quickly dissipated. Then, a stream of blood continuously appeared from the bone marrow. This stream of blood quickly swam in her body and gathered in her heart. After the bone-chilling cold dissipated, a stream of scorching hot blood full of vitality began to swim in her body. The corroded wounds quickly scabbed and healed. In just a few breaths, all the wounds had disappeared, and in their place was jade-like white skin. Phyllis's heartbeat became stronger and stronger, and streams of blood were transported to every part of her body. As the blood flowed, Phyllis's strength began to slowly increase. The essence of the white dragon's blood was fused into Hathaway's body. Not only did the dragon blood strengthen her physique, it also made her dragon vein even denser. During this period of time, her strength would also rapidly increase until she completely fused with the power of the dragon blood. Chapter 598. After the initial bone-piercing coldness subsided, a burning sensation slowly flowed through her body. As this burning sensation flowed, a stream of power emerged from her body, making Phyllis feel as if she had been reborn. In order to maximize the effect of the dragon blood baptism, Su Len had spent a lot of effort. After carefully inspecting Phyllis's body, he personally presided over the baptism circle to maximize the effect of the dragon blood. Of course, the price of doing this was that the ritual would be more painful. If one's body was not strong enough, they might not be able to withstand it and die. However, this time, they were using a white dragon, the weakest of the 5 colored dragons. After this baptism, Phyllis's various resistances had been greatly improved. It would be much easier for her to do this kind of baptism in the future. In some stories sung by bards, dragon slayers bathed in dragon blood and gained invulnerability and great strength. This kind of saying only existed in stories. If a normal person did this, there was a 99% chance that they would be killed by the corrosive nature of the dragon blood. As for the invulnerability and great strength, it was also an exaggeration. According to the data collected by Su Len, the dragon blood baptism would increase strength and constitution by about 3 points, and at the same time, they would gain the talent ability of dragon scale leather armor. The ability of dragon scale leather armor was not as powerful as one would think. At first, it could only resist arrows, which was equivalent to ordinary leather armor. However, this ability could grow. In the end, the defense of dragon scale leather armor would be very close to that of a real dragon scales. After a dragon bloodline wizard became a legend, they would awaken a half-dragon state. In this state, their strength would be further improved, and their dragon scale defense and all kinds of resistances would be improved. However, it was not easy to become a legend. The lowest level dragon bloodline wizard had a lifespan of about 300 years. After becoming a legend, a dragon bloodline wizard would gain a lifespan of about 1,000 years, which was basically the same as a wizard. Many dragon bloodline wizards lived longer than dragons. Dragons would enter the old dragon stage when they were 800 to 1,000 years old. At this time, dragons would usually stay in their lairs other than foraging for food. Even powerful creatures like dragons would become weak when they entered old age. However, although the strength of the dragons had weakened during this period of time, they would not rush up to fight like adult dragons or young dragons when they encountered enemies. Instead, they would choose to launch sneak attacks. However, it would be a mistake to think that an old dragon would be easy to deal with. At this stage, a dragon's magic ability would be greatly improved, even if it was the white dragon, which had the lowest intelligence among the chromatic dragons. The magic power in the dragon's blood was at its strongest during this period. In fact, the ancient dragons were stronger, but even the incarnations of the gods and saints didn't want to provoke the dragons of that period. It was the best way to use it for the dragon blood baptism. As for using the ancient dragon or primordial dragon bloodline, that was just courting death. In fact, not all dragons had the opportunity to advance to the ancient dragon stage. After entering the old dragon stage, dragons would often need to sleep. At this stage, they needed to sleep to accumulate strength for the next evolution of their life. If this dragon suffered too many injuries when it was young and lost a lot of vitality, it was very likely that it would never wake up again during its sleep. Only those dragons with good strength and talent could pass through the old dragon stage. Life would bloom in them again, and their bodies, which were originally full of decay, would become full of vitality again. Dragons who woke up from their long sleep would enter the ancient dragon stage. At this stage, there was basically no one in the material plane who could threaten the dragons. After crossing the threshold of the ancient dragon stage, the lifespan of the colossal dragon would be extended again. As long as they were not killed midway, they would basically be able to evolve into an ancient dragon. As for evolving into an ancient dragon, that was another threshold. Phyllis used the blood of the old dragon stage white dragon for the dragon blood baptism, and after the completion, her strength was naturally improved. At this moment, she felt as if there was endless strength in her body. After completing the dragon blood baptism, Sulen asked, "How do you feel?" Phyllis nodded and said proudly, "Very good. I feel like I can punch a hole in the wall. Do you want to try? I feel like I can beat you down with one punch." Oh, she's full of herself. Sulen looked at Phyllis, who was waving her fist, and secretly wanted to laugh. It seemed that if he did not teach her a lesson, she would not know how powerful he was. Sulen decided not to go to the other rooms tonight. He would stay here tonight and give Phyllis special care for tonight. Without much time to think, Sulen, who had long been boiling because of the dragon blood baptism, stretched out his arm and directly grabbed Phyllis, who was showing off and preparing to punch Sulen and kick the dragon, and threw her directly on the bed. A sleepless night began. The whole night, the room echoed with Phyllis's begging for mercy. Early the next morning, Suluan walked out of the door refreshed, looking in high spirits. After a simple breakfast, Sulen directly took Phyllis to the training field for the test. It had to be said that the effects of the dragon bloodline baptism were really good. After the fierce battle last night, Phyllis had recovered after resting for a short while, and she was also standing on the training ground with an excited look on her face, eager to give it a try. Was the lesson last night not enough? Sulen looked at Phyllis, who was eager to try, and said with a smile. "Humph, you had an unfair advantage. If it were not for your thunder power." Phyllis's face suddenly turned red. Sulen laughed. Even the little succubus could not withstand the power of the plasma cannon, let alone a dragon disciple like you. It seemed that he had to let you recognize reality again. Not convinced? Sulen laughed in his heart. Well, I'll give you a chance. Go change your clothes, and we'll practice together. Don't worry, I won't take advantage of you. I'll definitely control my strength to the same level as yours. Really? Phyllis's eyes lit up. Of course. If you don't believe me, you can ask your sister Hathaway to judge, Sulen said with a smile. Phyllis's eyes rolled twice, and then she thought for a moment, shook her head and said, "No, you're a warrior, and your martial arts are superb. Even if you control your strength to the same level and rely on your skillful combat skills, you're still not something that I can deal with. Then what do you want?" Sulen picked up a wooden training sword and waved it to test the feel of it. "How about this, you let Sister Hathaway cast the slow spell, gravity spell, and weakness spell on you, and then you're not allowed to use any energy." "That's fair," Phyllis said directly. "Well, you might as well just say that I'll stand still and let you decide." Sulen snorted and said. "It's not impossible. As long as you're willing, I have no objections," Phyllis said directly. "You wish. We'll do as you said just now." Sulen glanced at the complacent Phyllis. "Hathaway, you cast the spell." Just do as Phyllis said just now. Hathaway stepped forward with a smile on her face and looked at Phyllis with a half-smile. Then she said, "This is what you've discussed. You can't go back on your words. Don't go back on your word when you lose. We won't go back on our words. Don't worry. We definitely won't go back on our words." The two nodded and said. With that, Hathaway raised her wand and was about to cast the spell. A light flashed, and at this moment, Phyllis suddenly said, "Wait a minute." Hathaway stopped and then looked at Phyllis and asked, "What's wrong? You're regretting it?" Phyllis shook her head and said, "No, I'm not regretting it." "Then what's the matter?" Sulen asked. A sly light flashed in Phyllis's eyes, and then she said, "It's just a simple competition. It's not interesting. How about we raise the stakes?" "Hee, you think you're 100% sure?" Sulen said with a smile. "What? You don't dare? If you don't dare, then forget it. Sister Hathaway, you can continue. Just pretend I didn't say anything." Phyllis waved her hand and said casually. "Okay, since you want to bet, we'll do as you say." Sulen agreed directly. "Good. If I win, you have to promise me one thing," Phyllis said eagerly. Sulen shook his head. "What if you lose?" "How can I lose?" Phyllis said confidently. "What if? If I lose, I promise you one thing." "If you lose, what will you use as the stake?" Sulen said. "If I lose, I'll also promise you one thing," Phyllis said straightforwardly. Sulen clapped his hands. "Good. Everyone heard it. The loser has to promise the winner one thing. No one can go back on their word." We all heard it. The other girls smiled and nodded. The loser has to promise the winner one thing. "Hathaway, cast a spell on me. Let's start." Sulen waved his hand at Hathaway and said. A few spells flashed in succession. Sulen felt his body become heavy, and then a sense of weakness came over him. Slow. Curse of weakness. Gravity. A few spells landed on Sulen's body. At that moment, Sulen felt like his body was trapped in a swamp. Every movement became very difficult. This was mainly because Hathaway's wizard rank was too high. If a high-grade wizard cast the same spell, there was a 90% chance that Sulen would be immune to it. "Alright, now that the spell has been cast, are you ready?" "If you are, let's start." Sulen waved the iron oak longsword in his hand. "I'm ready." Phyllis changed into a training outfit and walked out. The tight training outfit outlined her curvaceous body and made her look very sexy. "Catch!" Sulen smiled and threw an iron oak longsword to her. Chapter 599. Dreams were plentiful, but reality was harsh. Although Phyllis gave Sulen all kinds of restrictions and asked Sulen to suppress his strength to the same level as hers, Sulen still won the battle, and it was a very easy victory. Although they were at the same level and there was Hathaway's spell restriction, Sulen's rich experience, skillful fighting skills, and fighting intuition could not be restrained. So in the end, Phyllis was taught a lesson by Sulen and had to agree to one of his conditions. Sulen looked at the reluctant Phyllis and said, "Now you know the difference between us. The dragon blood baptism is very powerful, but you didn't master your own strength, so it's normal for you to be defeated by me. The physical fitness of a dragon disciple is not worse than that of a warrior, so combat training is necessary. Next, I will teach you swordsmanship. Of course, it's not just swordsmanship. The drows here are also very good at fighting, and those half-elven rangers. You need to find time to practice with them every day. When you can defeat them all, you will be considered a master." Although Sulen's main weapon was a halberd, he did not give up on swordsmanship, so his swordsmanship was still very good. The Florentine royal family also collected many swordsmanship, such as the famous White Raven swordsmanship, cross swordsmanship, monolith swordsmanship, and so on. Su Len glanced at Hathaway and the others and said, "And you guys, don't think that only Phyllis needs training. You also need training. Although you are spellcasters, your close combat skills are average. You can encounter any situation on the battlefield. Once you are closed in, you will not have time to cast spells. Whether it is to familiarize yourself with the enemy's attack methods or to attack, you must master swordsmanship. And when you use up your spells, you can only use a long sword to kill the enemy." Generally speaking, in the Wizard Academy, the orthodox wizards would study close combat. A qualified combat wizard would not be weak in close combat. Moreover, among the wizards, there were some transfiguration schools. They could directly transform into some powerful races. Some transfiguration spells could even turn a wizard into a melee maniac. Some radical wizards even claimed that a wizard who couldn't fight in close combat was not a good wizard. It was best to be the type like Gandalf, who could cast a fireball with his left hand and slash with his right hand. A good wizard should be able to kill from one end of the battlefield to the other with a staff and a long sword. Northern Wilderness, Death Canyon. This valley that ordinary people had only heard of was located in the depths of the northern wasteland. The surrounding ecological environment was extremely complex. There were sunflowers, man-eating trees, mutated monsters, and many more. At the same time, there were many kinds of poisonous insects and ferocious beasts. The terrain was also quite dangerous. The cliffs were steep, and there were often falling rocks. At that height, even a thumb-sized stone could make a big bump on a person's head. Even the best adventurers wouldn't be willing to come to such a place. However, these were not the most deadly creatures. The most dangerous creatures were the undead. In this valley, a large number of the undead were undead. It was said that there was an undead lord sleeping in the depths of the valley, but so far, no one had seen it. Su Len knew that the legend was true. The undead lord was sealed here by the ancient arcanists. But Su Len didn't know why the arcanists didn't kill the undead lord and sealed it instead. But since then, the beautiful valley changed. The power of the undead creature radiated throughout the entire valley. Then, the creatures in the valley began to change. Undead creatures began to be born in this place. As time passed, the number of mutated animals and undead in Death Canyon increased. It became very dangerous. Some of the more powerful undead creatures would fall into a deep sleep. But as long as there was a big commotion in the valley, these powerful undead creatures would wake up. Almost every year, there would be some monsters or adventurers who accidentally entered the valley and died. Fortunately, Death Canyon was very far from Northern Town City. It was thousands of kilometers away. Unless the undead lord broke the seal, it wouldn't affect this place. At this moment, the sound of a fierce battle suddenly came from Death Canyon. Then, several adventurers rushed out of the valley. Behind them, dozens of undead creatures were hot on their heels. One of the adventurers took out a scroll and tore it open with a pained expression. He then threw it behind him. Boom! As soon as the scroll fell to the ground, a large amount of flames rose up. In an instant, a wall of fire appeared on the ground. A few undead that were close to the front rushed into the sea of fire. The flames burned fiercely, and the undead creatures quickly turned into fireballs. The other undead creatures had no choice but to stop when they saw the wall of fire. They roared at the adventurers in the distance. F***ck, I've suffered a huge loss this time. That's the magic scroll I used to save my life. When we return, I'm going to take the lion's share of the loot, the adventurer who had just used the magic scroll said, his heart aching. Blair, it's all thanks to your scroll. You can get one more, said another adventurer who seemed to be the leader of the group. Leader, we should have made a lot of money this time. We collected a total of 16 ghost head mushrooms, ghost grass, and many other magic plants. Although this place is dangerous, the harvest is really big, said another thin adventurer excitedly. This place does have a lot of good stuff, but it's too dangerous. Scar almost died in there. Now that he's seriously injured, he'll probably have to rest for a month. He can't come here again, said the leader. Ahem, Blair, thank you. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to come out this time, said another pale-faced middle-aged man after panting for a while. Hee, Quentin, it's okay. You saved my life before, didn't you? Blair said with a smile. I'll have to rest for a while when we go back this time. Ahem. Quentin coughed violently a few times. His face had a sickly flush. Time passed quickly. In the blink of an eye, a month had passed. After Sulen stayed in the North Wind Tower for a while, he went to Deepwater City. After Deepwater City obtained the trade route to Salt City Port, the Second Fleet finally returned. This time, in addition to the fleet of Deepwater City, there were more than a dozen merchant ships from other caravans. After more than 2 months of spreading, more and more people knew about Deepwater Port. Sulen's stronghold in Deepwater Port contributed greatly to this. Last time, Sulen took the fleet to trade in Salt City Port, leaving a lot of cane sugar and honey. The sales of these luxury goods were very hot. When those merchants with sensitive information learned that the cane sugar and honey were transported from Deepwater City, they began to inquire about Deepwater City. After learning that this was a newly opened port city, everyone's eyes lit up. In the eyes of these merchants, this represented an undeveloped market. If it weren't for the fact that no one knew the route to Deepwater City, these merchants would have been impatient to go there. Fortunately, these merchants didn't have to wait long. The Second Fleet from Deepwater City arrived at the port, so when the caravan returned, a large number of merchants directly sent a ship to follow the fleet to Deepwater Port. Deepwater City suddenly became very lively because of the arrival of a large number of merchants. A large number of goods were transported for trade. All kinds of goods that had been prepared in Deepwater City were sold out. Many caravans even set up warehouses in Deepwater City, intending to trade for a long time. These merchants were very surprised when they learned that this was the northern wilderness. After learning that the North Wind Principality had opened a trade route from here to the Kingdom of Florence and the kingdoms further west, they were very surprised. Then they became even more enthusiastic about this port. Obviously, they saw the potential of this trade route. Sulen returned to North Town with the caravan, but when he arrived at the city, he found something unusual. When the caravan entered the city, Sulen found that many people in the city were coughing. Many people were queuing at the entrance of the hospital. What's the matter? Sulen's face was a little dignified. Not far away, there was a low-level official recording the taxes of a shop. Sulen directly went over to inquire. Your Majesty. After seeing Sulen, the official immediately became nervous and even stuttered a little. No need to salute. Sulen directly stopped him and then asked, "What's the matter with the hospital? Why are there so many people queuing outside?" Your Majesty, those people are sick. They have fever and cough. But we don't have enough doctors here, so they can only queue here, the official said. Not enough doctors? Sulen was slightly stunned, but then he realized that there were not many doctors in this era, because almost every city had a temple. Usually, when the rich fell sick, they could directly go to the temple and the priest could cast a dispel disease spell to cure them. But it cost money. Even the lowest level of theurgy was expensive. It would cost at least 5 kinnar. How many civilians could afford such a sum of money? Most of the time, when the poor fell sick, they could only stay at home. If they could survive, they would be fine, but if they couldn't, they would die. Of course, in order to increase the number of believers, each church would go to the slums every once in a while to treat a few poor people for free. Usually, about 5 people would be treated at a time. They would also carry out all kinds of propaganda to make more people believe in them. North Town was an exception. The residents of North Town had some money in their hands, and the price of the hospital was not expensive. It was just that the number of people was small. But it was already very good. At least ordinary people and the poor could see a doctor. Chapter 600. How many people are sick now? Su Len asked directly. According to the statistics, there are 603 people who came to see the doctor, the official said. Su Len's face was solemn. There were already more than 600 people who came to see the doctor. There must be a lot of people who did not come to see the doctor. Judging from the situation, the disease was contagious. If they did not quarantine and treat it as soon as possible, it would only be a matter of time before the entire city was infected. At the thought of this, Su Len did not have time to rest. He immediately returned to the city hall and called all the officials there. Your Majesty, what are your orders? Soon, a large number of officials came to the city hall. Su Len looked at them and said, when I came back just now, there were more than 600 people in the city who fell sick with a cold and fever. Didn't you know? Your Majesty, we have arranged for people to treat them. At the same time, we have ordered to buy herbs and send them to the hospital. One of the officials hesitated and said. Is that all? Su Len interrupted the official. Do you think this is a normal illness? This is a plague. A plague. Hearing the word, plague, the official's face changed drastically. There had also been outbreaks of plagues in this world, and more than once. Basically, every outbreak of plagues would cause a large number of deaths. Due to the terrible hygiene standards of this world, plagues were simply unstoppable. Even strong professionals would be infected and die. During the most severe plagues, several prosperous cities were directly turned into dead cities. More than a quarter of the population died in most cities. Some cities even had more than half of the population. Professionals were physically stronger than ordinary people. Many of them had magic abilities. Their immunity was stronger than ordinary people, so the infection rate was not high. Many wizards also knew how to remove diseases and use magic to treat people. However, there was a limit to the number of people who could be treated. Compared to the huge population, it was undoubtedly a drop in the bucket. Yes, a plague, Su Len said directly. Immediately activate the emergency plan in Northern Town. Draw a quarantine area around the city and isolate all the patients. At the same time, check the entire city. Once there are signs of illness, isolate them immediately. Order the textile factory to sew 10,000 masks immediately. Let the basic staff and soldiers wear them to prevent infection. In addition, the family members of these patients, as well as the people who came into contact with them, should also be examined. Stop entering the city for now. Let the caravans stay in the camps outside the city. Su Len kept giving orders. After hearing that it was a plague, everyone became extremely nervous and hurriedly led people to deal with it. Soon, Northern Battlefront City became very busy. The news of the plague didn't spread. First of all, the plague wasn't that serious. It should be under control soon. Although there weren't many doctors in Northern Battlefront City, there were several temples here. Now that there was a plague, it shouldn't be a problem to ask them for help. As for not telling the civilians, Su Len was worried that the civilians would run away from the city if they knew about the plague. If that happened, the northern citadel that he had worked so hard to expand to more than 100,000 people would suffer a great loss. Also, send someone to invite the bishops of the various churches in the city. I will be holding a banquet in the palace tonight. Invite them to attend, Su Len said directly. Your Majesty, I will arrange for someone to send the invitations, a guard said. All right, you guys go deal with the plague. I'll go back to the Tower of Northwind and see if there's any other way. Su Len left the city hall and went straight to the Tower of Northwind. At the astrology station, you're saying there's a plague in the city? Hathaway said in surprise. Yes, I saw more than 600 patients in the hospital when I came back. They all have fever, headache, and weakness. Some have even fainted, Su Len said. It does seem to be a plague. Hathaway nodded and said, I'm sorry, Su Len, I haven't been paying enough attention to the city. Otherwise, I would have known about the plague a long time ago. It's not your fault. Su Len shook his head and said, the plague came too suddenly. There are more than 100,000 people in the city. The divine spells of the priests are not enough. I want you to do some research and see if you can make a special cure for the plague as soon as possible. Alright, send a patient to the Tower of Northwind. I'll do some research and make a special cure for you as soon as possible, Hathaway said straightforwardly. As a matter of fact, Northern Battlefront City had a good environment and many buildings to reduce the spread of the disease. This made Northern Battlefront City much more resistant to the disease. If it were any other city, at least a few thousand people would have been infected by the disease. Moreover, the disease would have spread throughout the city. On Sullen's status panel, a series of data showed that there was a plague in the Northwind City. Luckily, the numbers were not very high. After Su Len issued a lot of orders, the numbers had stopped increasing. It was obvious that the measures he had taken before were effective. Su Len sent people to the hospital to find a few patients for experiments. Hathaway found a few wizard apprentices to help her with the research. Your Majesty, it's almost time for the banquet. Most of the bishops of the churches have arrived. Do you want to meet them? I'll be there right away. Su Len went straight back to the palace. The banquet hall was brightly lit, and a few high-level priests were chatting. When they saw Su Len come in, they all went up to greet him. Su Luen simply exchanged a few words with them and then invited them to sit down. Your Majesty, may I know why you called us here this time? The priest of the God of Wisdom asked directly. Something did happen. Su Len took a sip of tea and continued, a plague has been discovered in the Northwind City. A plague? Everyone's face froze. The relaxed atmosphere suddenly became serious. Yes, a plague. Su Len nodded and said, but fortunately, the plague has not spread. It has been contained to a certain extent. Now I need your help to get rid of this plague. Your Majesty, we are willing to do our part for the Northwind City, the priest of the Goddess of Life said directly. Thank you so much, Su Len said happily. In return, I promise you that I can build a temple in the Deepwater port to spread the glory of the Goddess of Life forever. Thank you for your generosity. The priest of the Goddess of Life stood up and thanked Su Len. Several other priests of the temple who were a step slower expressed their willingness to help in exchange for preaching in Deepwater City, and Su Luen also agreed to do so. With the help of the priests, the Northwind City suddenly had enough people. A few temples provided about 20 priests, and the doctors and wizards in the Northwind City began to treat the patients. At the same time, a large number of soldiers began to investigate the Northwind City. It didn't matter if they were slaves, civilians, merchants, or mercenaries, they all needed to be investigated. It was easy to investigate the civilians in the Northwind City. The Northwind City used the market system, and everyone lived in the market. Once they returned to the market, they just needed to close the door and investigate them one by one. As for the merchants, since they all reported when they entered the city, it was also easy to investigate them. Only the adventurers and mercenaries were more troublesome. The Northwind City had a strict management system, and all the hotels were inspected. Although some mercenaries and adventurers thought it was an offense, they could only accept it in front of the powerful army of the Northwind City. As for those who dared to resist, they were beaten up by the barbarians. They were then thrown into jail to reflect on their actions. The only problem was that the investigation had severely affected the business of the Northwind City. Many merchant groups were settled in temporary camps around the city. The Northwind City would be responsible for the food of these merchant groups. They would only be allowed to enter the city after the plague had been eradicated. The Northwind City was very efficient. After all, the Northwind City was not like the United States of America in Lin Jie's previous life, where the government did not care about human lives. They could not even settle the issue of masks after a year or two of arguing. There was no democracy here, no lighthouse of the free world. Instead, it was ruled by the cruel dictatorship of a feudal lord. Those who did not submit would be killed directly. Therefore, the entire city was soon under control. After the plague in the city was under control, Sulan began to investigate the source of the plague. The Northwind City was very hygienic, and it was completely different from other cities in this world. Sulan would not be surprised if a plague broke out in other cities, but it was unusual for a plague to suddenly appear in the Northwind City. The chances of a plague breaking out in any other city in this world were higher than the Northwind City, but it happened in the Northwind City. He planned to find the source of the plague and determine if it was intentional or an accident. The source of the plague wasn't hard to find. All they had to do was find the first patient. There weren't many infected people in Northern Town. Although they were separated into several different areas, it didn't take long for them to find the source of the plague. You said the source of the plague was brought by a few adventurers? Sulan asked with a frown. Yes, a few adventurers came to the clinic a week ago. They were all coughing, having a fever, and feeling weak. One of them was seriously injured, but their bodies are still very strong. Find out where they are and bring them back. Su Luan ordered directly. Soon, groups of soldiers began to search for the adventurers in the city. Chapter 601. Due to the existence of supernatural forces in this world, there were also some life forms that could control the plague. The most famous one was the Voodoo School. The Voodoo School was a branch of the Wizard School. It originated from the ancient shamanism. They mastered the power of the shamans and combined it with the knowledge of the Wizard School, which eventually developed into the Voodoo School. The Voodoo School looked very evil at first glance. They liked to control all kinds of disgusting poisonous insects and research all kinds of poisons. Sulan hated the Voodoo School the most. The Voodoo School wizards knew how to control the plague. Other than this school, some necromancy schools also had the same power, such as the plague zombies. These undead creatures that could spread the plague on a large scale were created by the necromancy school. It could be said that the Voodoo School and the necromancy school developed to the point where everyone hated them. It was all their own fault. This world was very rich in creatures. Other than all kinds of ferocious beasts, there were also mutant beasts, magic beasts, and so on. There were even prehistoric giant beasts living on some continents, such as dinosaurs and titan pythons. There were even creatures from other worlds that had been brought here by the ancient arcanists. Sulan was flipping through a monster illustration book. It was compiled from the newly collected information in the North Town City. He was looking at a dinosaur. It was a rainbow dinosaur. Its appearance was very similar to a dinosaur, but its skin was rainbow-colored. Its body was more than 15 meters long. It was a giant creature. Its strength was almost on par with a giant dragon. Although this dinosaur was powerful, its intelligence was not high. At this moment, a servant hurried over and said, "Your Majesty, we have found the adventurers." Sulan closed the book and asked, "Are you sure it's them? The plague spread from them?" "Yes, the chief wizard has confirmed it. They were the first to carry the plague." "Have you confirmed the source of the plague?" Sulan continued to ask. "According to the adventurers, they were infected in the Death Valley in the northern wasteland," the servant replied respectfully. "Send some people to investigate," Sulan said after some thought. The Death Valley was more than 1,000 kilometers away from the North Town City. As long as they did not go there for an adventure, it was not easy to get infected. However, it was still worth investigating. After a week of lockdown in northern town, the plague was finally eradicated. Even though they had lost some money, they were still happy that the plague was still in its early stages. However, other than that, the residents of North Town City had also developed some good habits, such as drinking water from the river, wearing masks, and bathing every day. After the plague was resolved, North Town City continued to develop rapidly. At the same time, a large number of merchant ships began to transport goods to Deepwater City along the Red Sand River. These goods were used for sea trade. After the fleet arrived at Deepwater City, they would also carry a large number of overseas goods to North Town City. However, the prosperous business seemed to have attracted the attention of the surrounding bandits. This time, a group of monster bandits tried to besiege the fleet and rob them. However, as soon as he made a move, he was beaten to a pulp by the guards on the fleet. After Su Len stayed in North Town City for a few days, the scouts who went to investigate had already sent back the news. No one knew what had happened in Death Canyon, but the undead monsters in the canyon had left. The entire Death Canyon became a veritable Death Canyon. Right now, the undead calamity was playing out there. Su Len, I think we should stop the undead calamity here or take care of them all. Although Death Canyon is more than 1,000 kilometers away from us, it doesn't mean it's completely safe. The undead calamity will spread all over the place, and they also carry the plague. It won't take long for it to spread here. The adventurers last time were the best warning, Hathaway said. Alright, then let's send all the undead calamity skeletons back to the underworld. By the way, we've already developed the antidote for the plague. It's very simple to make. Even a beginner apprentice wizard can make it. How much does it cost? Can we provide the raw materials ourselves? Can we supply them to the Duchy of North Wind? Su Len immediately asked. The cost is around 1 silver NAR. Apart from a few enchanted herbs, the rest are just ordinary herbs. Those enchanted herbs can be found in the mysterious realm, and the production is very high. It's more than enough for us to use, Hathaway said. That's good. Next, let's arrange for the apprentice wizards to mass-produce them, Su Len decided. What about Death Canyon? Let's send some people to take care of it. As long as we don't enter Death Canyon, it shouldn't be a problem, Su Len said. Whatever, I'll take a team and go there myself. We'll settle this once and for all. Death Canyon was very dangerous. It was full of poisonous insects and man-eating plants. They needed to bring a lot of insect repellents, antidotes, and some powerful warriors. Soon, all the materials were ready. Early the next morning, a portal was opened on the astrology platform of North Wind Tower. Su Len led a group of barbarian warriors and 2 teams of archers through the portal. In the next second, they appeared more than 1,000 kilometers away from North Town City. With a familiar light, Su Len and the others appeared in a gloomy place less than 20 miles away from Death Canyon. Scouts, start patrolling immediately. The rest of you, stay alert. We'll set up a temporary territory here for the time being. Su Len did a simple search of the surrounding environment and let people set up the territory. Su Len was a little envious of Hathaway. She had Mistra's mansion. This spell was not destructive, but it could be summoned in the wild to live. Mistra's mansion was a spell that folded the space of a different dimension. It could seal a mansion in a different dimension and summon it when needed. Mistra's mansion could be said to be a necessary spell for traveling. Soon, a large number of scouts gave the collected information to Su Len. After a simple look, he began to assign tasks. You guys are in charge of this direction. I don't want any monsters to break through here, Su Len said directly. A simple map was spread out, and Su Len began to divide the areas that each team was responsible for. At this moment, an anxious shout was heard. Get the antidote, quickly. We have people here who are poisoned. A warrior shouted as he ran. Soon, an apprentice picked up a bottle of antidote and poured it in. Chapter 602. The antidote quickly took effect, and the poisoned soldier's breathing visibly stabilized. The black blood at the wound also slowly flowed out under the effect of the antidote. In just a few minutes, the blood had already returned to its original red color. "All right, it's fine now. Send him to the back to rest. It's another fine lad." After the sorcerer apprentice checked that there were no problems, he directly sent the injured soldier to the temporary camp at the back. Sulen used the earth wall spell, magic control plus change of mentality, to build a few houses in the camp. Then, he used mud to rock to turn the mud into hard rocks, and built a temporary camp here. Because someone was injured and poisoned, the other soldiers became more cautious. "Something is coming," a half-elf archer warned. Half-elf archers had sharp eyes and could discover the enemy at the first moment. With the archer's warning, the others all became vigilant. Kacha. The sound of some branches breaking came from the bushes in front. Then, a ferocious giant bear came out of the dark forest. Its tall body was like a small mountain, full of oppression. Its blood-red pupils revealed a hint of madness, and in its ferocious mouth was a row of sharp teeth that flickered with cold light. There were many red marks on its body, and the fur on it was much shorter than the rest of its body. This ferocious giant bear's body was full of bumps and hollows, and it looked like it had been casually bitten a few times. There were also some places where the fur had completely fallen off, and one could see the dark red flesh that leaked out. It was obvious that this ferocious giant bear had also been infected by the plague, but its physique was high enough to withstand the plague. The wounds on its body should have not completely healed. Moreover, after experiencing the plague, this ferocious giant bear seemed to have become more powerful than before. After seeing the group, it did not have any fear. With a low roar, it directly rushed towards the group. Its huge body was like a small mountain, and when its huge bare paws came down, even the rocks would be smashed into pieces. Frost arrow. A blue magic arrow instantly shot out from the crowd, directly hitting the dire bear in the next second. An icy blue color immediately appeared on the dire bear's body, and its originally swift movements immediately became slow and stiff. Taking advantage of this opportunity, the surrounding soldiers charged forward. 2 soldiers of the capture barracks blocked the attacks of the dire bear with their shields, while the spear in their other hand pierced out like a poisonous snake. The sharp spear left a bloody hole on the body of the dire bear. Roar! Under the pain, the ferocious bear's eyes became even crazier. Its huge bare paw viciously slammed onto the shield of one of the soldiers of the capture barracks. A dent appeared on the shield made of fine iron. The huge force caused the body of the soldier of the capture barracks to involuntarily retreat. The warrior of the capture barracks slightly frowned. The other warrior beside him seized the opportunity, the spear in his hand instantly piercing into the eyes of the dire bear. Blood splattered everywhere. The heavily injured dire bear roared, its powerful bear paw viciously slapping out, wanting to slap the human who had caused it such heavy injuries to death. However, the warrior of the capture barracks was already prepared. After his attack landed, he did not continue to fight and directly retreated. Bang! With a muffled sound, a deep imprint was left on the ground where the dire bear had just been. Ice arrow. Another blue arrow of light flew out, and the body of the dire bear was suddenly covered with frost. Its movement speed became even more sluggish. The 2 soldiers of the capture barracks seized the opportunity to continuously attack. Very quickly, the dire bear let out a mournful howl, loudly falling to the ground. After dealing with this dire bear, several soldiers dragged this big fellow back to the barracks. Although the meat of a dire bear could not be compared to a magical beast, it was still very good to use to fill one's stomach. The strength of the dire bear in front of them was not bad. A normal dire bear's strength was around rank 8, and a grand knight could deal with it. However, this dire bear in front of them had already reached the peak of the third step, almost reaching the fourth step. Dire bears were originally known for their strength, and a peak rank 3 dire bear's strength was even more abnormal. This was because it had encountered Sullen's capture barracks. If a normal heavy armored spearman encountered this dire bear, even if they didn't die from a single slap, their bones and tendons would definitely be broken. After Su Len saw the dire bear's carcass, he inspected it and found that there was no plague on it. Then, he directly ordered people to dispose of it for lunch. This time, he had brought 3 teams of 60 people. Half of them had reached the third step, and the rest were all rank 2. These people could be said to be the king of stomachs. This dire bear in front of them was about 2 tons, enough for them to eat for 2 days. Then, these soldiers began to divide into small groups to clear out the surrounding area. This place was only about 5 miles away from the Death Valley. There were not many monsters running out of the valley. In addition to clearing out these monsters, they also needed to clear out the plague in the Death Valley. Not only did Hathaway successfully make an antidote to the plague, but she also made a powder that could eliminate the plague and prevent it from spreading again. This time, Northern Battlefront City had made sufficient preparations to eliminate the plague. All the water sources around the Death Valley had to be sprinkled with the powder. Water sources could quickly spread the plague, and once the water sources were contaminated, the surrounding animals would all be infected. Hiss! As the powder spread, many infected animals were driven out of the valley by the powder. Then, they were shot down by the half-elf magic archers. Boom! There was a loud noise. A large tree was uprooted and thrown over. The few spear guards around it quickly dodged. Then, a giant snake tail swept across, and a spear guard who couldn't dodge in time was sent flying. The giant snake's scarlet tongue trembled slightly. Its strange dark red eyes moved back and forth. This giant snake's head alone was 5 or 6 meters tall. Its body was more than 20 meters long. The giant snake slithered quickly. In the blink of an eye, it had reached the spear guard who was sent flying. Its scarlet mouth opened wide, intending to swallow him. Lightning spear. A loud shout was like a thunderclap. It was so loud that it made people's ears go numb. In the next second, a long spear made of lightning flew out. The lightning flashed and the giant snake's head was hit. The lightning spear had an infinite amount of power and stabbed into the giant snake's head. The giant snake, which was so fierce just a moment ago, was nailed to the ground by the lightning spear without any resistance. Countless bolts of lightning exploded at this moment. The giant snake's body swayed a few times before it fell to the ground. Seeing that the giant snake was killed, the surrounding soldiers couldn't help but cheer. It was still difficult for them to deal with a monster of this level. Whoosh! 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 Sparse sounds came from the surrounding grass. A half-elf magic archer directly shot a flame arrow in that direction. The flames flew past, illuminating the surroundings. The surroundings suddenly became clear. The faces of the nearby warriors changed when they saw that under the illumination of the flames, a dense pack of poisonous snakes was rapidly slithering towards them. The large ones were as thick as an adult's arm, while the small ones were only as thick as a finger. Countless poisonous snakes covered the entire ground. Just one look was enough to make one's scalp tingle. Kerosene bombs. After seeing the large number of poisonous snakes, one of the soldiers subconsciously threw a bottle of kerosene over. Boom! As soon as the bottle of kerosene hit the ground, it shattered. Black kerosene splattered everywhere. Immediately after, a fire arrow flew over. The kerosene instantly rose into a 2-meter-tall flame. The surrounding poisonous snakes were burned to death. Seeing this, the others reacted. They immediately threw over a dozen pots. In less than a breath's time, the entire ground was covered in flames. Inside the sea of fire, a large number of poisonous snakes struggled and rolled. However, they were quickly burned to ashes. The air was filled with a burnt smell. Clean up the surroundings. Don't set this forest on fire, Su Len said after looking around. Most of those poisonous snakes will be burned to death. After a while, you guys extinguish the fire. Next, everyone set up an isolation zone around the sea of fire. At the same time, they started killing the snakes that escaped the net. Chapter 603. In the evening, everyone finished the battle and returned to the camp. Su Len summoned the magic guards to keep watch and set up some warning circles. There was no need for anyone to keep watch at night. The soldiers who had been fighting for a day began to set up a campfire and prepare food. Bah! Why does this giant python meat have a weird taste? It's disgusting. A soldier tasted the cooked giant python meat and threw it aside with a look of disgust. Su Len sniffed the giant python meat. There was a strong fishy smell on it, so he threw it aside. He then cut a piece of fierce bear meat and continued to roast it. The fierce bear meat soon emitted a tempting fragrance. Su Len took out Frodo's barbecue seasoning and sprinkled some on the meat. The aroma became even stronger. He brushed a layer of sauce on the meat and began to eat. Night fell. Su Len went into his room to meditate. The others also fell asleep. The forest was very quiet because of the killing during the day. Only the magic guards summoned by Su Len stood around the camp. The night passed quickly. When the sun rose again, the camp was lively again. After a simple breakfast, Su Len led the soldiers to the Death Canyon. Group haste. With a flash of light, everyone felt their bodies lighten, and then their movement speed immediately increased a lot. Group haste could make people run faster than a galloping horse. If it was a rogue who was good at agility, they could do even more incredible moves, such as jumping on roofs and walls, or even running on almost vertical walls. Death Canyon was very dangerous. Along the way, Su Luen led the soldiers forward. Along the way, they constantly encountered wandering undead creatures. After sensing the aura of life on the soldiers, they would immediately rush up to attack. However, most of these undead creatures were zombie beasts or ghosts. These monsters might be a nuisance to others, but they were nothing to the army of Northern Fortress City. They were easily wiped out. Although the Northern City did not send many people for this operation, their strength was not bad. A team of barbarian warriors had all been implanted with the blood of the frost giants. After transforming, his strength would be close to that of a legendary tier being. Against these tier 2 undead creatures, it would be a piece of cake. With the cooperation of the barbarians, the army of Northern Battlefront City was like a hot knife through butter. They soon arrived at the Valley of Death. As soon as they got close, a thick aura of death loomed over them. The entire Death Valley was shrouded in such an aura. This evil aura was like poison to normal people. In such an environment, they would be constantly modified by this evil energy and eventually become a degenerate with a twisted mind. There were all kinds of monsters and undead creatures wandering around the entrance of Death Valley. Su Len even saw a strange mushroom forest that was emitting a faint fluorescent light inside the valley. There were a lot of fluorescent mushrooms growing on the ground of Death Canyon. The originally dim canyon had become gloomy. Some fluorescent spores were floating in the air. When the breeze blew, these fluorescent spores would immediately scatter. Warning! The concentration of contaminated energy around the host is extremely high. Please take precautions. Warning! The concentration of contaminated energy around the host is extremely high. Please take precautions. Magic resistance. Sullen's body glowed. A wave of magic energy instantly enveloped everyone around him. The evil energy around him was repelled in an instant. Your Majesty, there's something wrong with those fluorescent spores. A half-elven magic archer reported after casting a spell. These fluorescent spores are the growth of fluorescent mushrooms. The mushrooms growing in Death Canyon are called ghost head mushrooms. They're a kind of magic herb, but their spores are highly poisonous. The half-elven magic archer crouched down and grabbed a handful of soil. He pinched it in his hand. The soil is very moist. It must have rained recently. The rain has made the Death Canyon even more humid. This kind of environment is very suitable for ghost head mushrooms. Ghost head mushrooms usually produce fluorescent spores after the rain. There were a lot of ghost head mushrooms in front of them. They were densely packed in a layer around the canyon. The outermost ghost head mushrooms were only a few centimeters tall, but the deeper they went, the bigger they became. Sulen found a lot of giant ghost head mushrooms that were almost a meter tall. While Suren and the others were observing the Death Canyon, a group of undead monsters that sensed the aura of the living rushed over. The barbarian warriors, who had been waiting impatiently for a long time, swept their swords across the monsters, cutting them in half as neatly as if they were cutting chives. Wild wind. A wild wind was summoned. The storm quickly rushed into the canyon. The fluorescent spores that were originally drifting were directly swept up into the sky by the storm. A large number of fluorescent spores rushed into the sky like a giant python. Although the fluorescent spores were poisonous and could reproduce quickly, they also had a problem. They couldn't be directly exposed to the sun. The sun would quickly kill the spores. Even the ghost head mushrooms couldn't be exposed to the sun. Otherwise, they would quickly wither and die. Although it was better to use strong light here, it would also destroy the ghost head mushrooms when it killed the fluorescent spores. The ghost head mushroom was a good magic material. It was not cheap. Sulen couldn't bear to destroy so many ghost head mushrooms. Soon, the various monsters at the entrance of Death Canyon were cleared. Sulen directly led the group forward. As they got closer, Sulen found a large number of bones where the ghost head mushrooms grew. Some of them even grew directly on the bones. These ghost head mushrooms would use the corpses as nutrients to quickly grow. After the group entered Death Canyon, monsters kept appearing and attacking. Sulen ordered people to collect the ghost head mushrooms while clearing out the monsters. Who knew how many creatures were buried in Death Canyon? The entire canyon floor was grayish-white. The bones of various unknown creatures were completely mixed together. Undead creatures were constantly resurrecting and attacking. After the ghost head mushrooms were collected, the army of Northern Battlefront City continued to venture deeper into the canyon. As they ventured deeper into Death Canyon, more and more undead creatures appeared. A large number of monsters formed groups and attacked the army. Sulen quickly discovered that after a large number of undead creatures died, they would leave behind some grayish soul crystals. Although most of these soul crystals were low to mid-rank, they could still be used to create clay golems and rock golems. After discovering this, Sulen planned to establish a camp here and kill the undead creatures to collect soul crystals. With these soul crystals, Northern Battlefront City could create a large number of clay golems and rock golems for all kinds of work. Chapter 604. The Golem Factory in Northern Battlefront City was already on the right track. Now, the number of golem army in Northern Battlefront City was limited by the soul crystals. There was a shortage of low-grade to high-grade soul crystals. The Golem Factory could operate normally because of the soul crystals Sulen collected. He didn't expect to find soul crystals in Death Valley. Sulen planned to build a base here and farm monsters there. However, before that, he had to deal with the plague in Death Valley. The plague in Death Valley contained the power of death. It was spread by the undead creatures. In order to deal with the plague, he had to find the source of the plague. Sulen suspected that the source of the plague was the ancient undead lord sealed in the depths of Death Valley. Thousands of years had passed. Even if the seal left behind by the Arcanists was still functional, it would have become unstable after such a long time. Moreover, with the arrival of the elemental tide, the undead lord would recover some of his power. The seal would become even more unstable. He could probably break out of the seal at any time. The elemental tide would affect all creatures in a material plane. However, the effect would be more obvious for powerful creatures. After all, even if the elemental tide fell, the chances of ordinary people becoming adepts would only decrease. Although the overall power of humans would decrease, the number of legendary monsters would also decrease. On the other hand, the power of powerful creatures would decrease drastically. On average, their power would drop by 3 levels. According to some records, after the last elemental tide, when the material plane fell into the lowest point of the elemental tide, the spellcasting ability of giant dragons decreased a lot. There was even a phenomenon where a dragon disciple's spellcasting ability surpassed that of a giant dragon. It was also the easiest time to slay a dragon. According to the research of the adepts, if the main material plane was not affected by the elemental tide, then the concentration of elemental energy would be at a lower level. It was like a shallow pond. It would be difficult to survive in a heavy rain. When the elemental tide came, the concentration of elemental energy would increase rapidly. It was like a full pond, and the big fish would become very strong. This was one of the reasons why legendary and legendary creatures would appear in large numbers every time the elemental tide came. Death Valley might be a dangerous place for others, but it was not dangerous for Su Len. This place was nothing compared to the bottomless abyss. Su Len led his army into the Death Valley. At this time, some high-level undead began to appear in the canyon. A bone devil was sneaking in among the skeletons. Just as it was about to launch a sneak attack, it was hit by a lightning spear. The power of the lightning spear was the best nemesis for monsters like the undead that were rich in negative energy. Lightning flashed across the bone devil's body, constantly obliterating the death energy on its body. The lightning dissipated, and the death energy on the bone devil's body completely dissipated. Its entire skeleton fell apart, and a high-grade soul crystal appeared in the pile of bones. Not bad. 1 high-grade soul crystal. Su Len gently crooked his finger, and the soul crystal was lifted up by a wave of energy and flew into Sullen's hand. Everyone, pay attention. Put away all of your soul crystals. Also, if there are any high-level undead, don't fight them. Wait for me to deal with them. Yes, Your Majesty. This is a good place. Su Len looked around and sighed. Death Valley was steep, and the valley was dark and damp. There were many places where the sun could not be seen during the day. The terrain was dangerous, and the negative energy was rich. It was not suitable for humans to live in, but it was perfect for the undead. With Su Len around, the undead creatures in the Death Valley could not stop them at all. After reaching the depths of the Death Valley, high-level undead creatures kept appearing. The most powerful undead creature was a 4th-grade lich. It was said that this kind of monster was resurrected after the caster died. It could use some spells from when it was alive, and it also had some intelligence. However, a high-level undead like the lich was too conspicuous. It was immediately discovered by Su Len as soon as it appeared. At first, he thought that it was a lich and was shocked. After taking a closer look, he realized that something was wrong. A lich and a lich did look similar, but a lich was a creature that the caster actively used the lich transformation circle to transform. A lich would have all of the memories and spells from when it was alive, and would be proficient in all kinds of undead spells. Every lich was basically at the legendary level. Most liches were otaku. They would hide in the wizard tower to research all kinds of spells and knowledge, and make all kinds of magic tools. It could be said that this kind of creature was more dangerous than a giant dragon. Most of the time, a lich's wealth was more than a giant dragon's. A lich was far from being a lich, and they were not on the same level. Before the lich could make a move, Su Len summoned a thunderbolt and struck it on the head. It was immediately struck half dead, and then it was blown up by Sullen's halberd. After the lich died, it also dropped a high-grade soul crystal. In addition to the soul crystal, there was also a white bone magic staff. This thing was useful for necromancers as it could increase the power of necromancy spells, but for other wizards, it was useless. After cleaning up these undead creatures, Su Len came to the deepest part of the canyon. Unexpectedly, there were no undead creatures in the deepest part of the canyon. There was only a building that looked like an altar, but because of the passage of time, this altar had become dilapidated. There were a lot of cracks on the altar, and death energy was constantly overflowing from those cracks. Looks like it's here. Seeing the altar in front of him, Su Len said. You guys stay here. Just one person will go over. Yes, Your Majesty. Su Luen took a few steps forward and approached the altar. The altar occupied a large area, with a diameter of over 10 meters. It was entirely made of obsidian. Logically speaking, this thing should be very sturdy. However, this altar looked like a dilapidated building, as if it would collapse at the slightest touch. Even the runes on the altar that were originally used to seal the altar had become incomplete. Many of the runes had been completely corroded by the death energy and had lost their function. Basically, it's completely damaged. It can't be repaired. We can only tear it down and rebuild it. After confirming the altar's condition, Sullen's face became serious. This sealing altar had been unmaintained for thousands of years. The wizard sect that sealed the undead lord had probably disappeared long ago. But this sealing altar doesn't seem to be simple. Su Len looked around the altar for a while and made some other discoveries. He did not feel the undead lord's aura under the altar, which meant that this altar was probably not suppressed in a material plane, but a small secret realm. At the thought of this, Sullen's eyes lit up. If this was a secret realm, then there should be some good stuff inside. Soon, Su Len felt the power of space under the altar. This was a space barrier. At this time, this space barrier had weakened greatly after thousands of years. Su Len quickly found a weak spot on the space barrier. He then left a teleportation coordinate around it, broke open a space crack, and went in. Sullen's vision twisted, and the next second, he appeared in an unfamiliar ruin. As soon as he entered, Su Len felt that the surroundings were very cold. He knew that the temperature was not low, but a large amount of negative energy had gathered here. It was the human soul that felt the coldness. Warning! Warning! An abnormal radiation field has appeared around the host. The concentration of negative energy in the surroundings is too high. Contaminated energy in the surroundings. Warning! Warning! The power of the death realm has been detected. Su Len frowned slightly. This secret realm had become a death realm. This was a place that only existed in the lower planes. The death realm was an area that had been completely transformed by the power of death. Here, even ordinary corpses would be quickly resurrected as undead. What did the wizard who sealed this place do? Su Len frowned. At this moment, a strange sound suddenly came from the darkness. Then, a bone spear instantly shot out, like a sharp sword, and pierced towards Su Len. Bang! Sullen's arm moved slightly, and the storm battle halberd appeared in front of him. The blade of the halberd moved slightly, and directly cut the bone spear in half. What's that? Some black shadows appeared in front of Su Len. They looked like humanoid creatures. They were tall and strong, and the surface of their bodies seemed to be covered by a black armor. The armor was completely black, and even the face was covered by a helmet. In their hands, there was a long sword surrounded by a strong aura of death. They looked like heavy knights wearing knight's armor. Death Knights? After seeing the appearance of these monsters, Su Len immediately recognized them. Death Knights were very powerful undead creatures. It was said that only the corpse of a high-grade knight could transform them. The strength of each death knight was at least grade 3, and most of them were grade 4. This kind of undead creature was said to be the most powerful undead creature below the legendary level. It was also the favorite troop of all undead lords. It was the strongest undead creature other than the bone dragon. Under normal circumstances, undead creatures would give people the impression that they were numerous and weak. For example, the lowest grade undead creatures, skeletons and zombies, moved slowly, had no command, and had obvious weaknesses. As long as one could resist the fear in one's heart, these undead creatures could be easily killed. However, Death Knights were completely different. These high-grade undead creatures had no weaknesses, no pain, strong attack power, and strong defense. They had simple intelligence and discipline. They were one of the few undead creatures that could form groups on their own. They were the most powerful undead army of the undead lords. Chapter 605. Lightning Spear. 5 Lightning Whips. Thunderstorm. After seeing this undead knight, Su Len immediately released a large number of lightning spells. Lightning spells dealt extra damage to the undead. In fact, the most damaging spells to the undead were the holy light spells, followed by lightning and fire. Normal undead were easy to deal with, but high-level undead were different. This was especially true for this kind of undead knights. They had no fear, no pain, no hunger, no fatigue, and no fear of death. They were proficient in all kinds of battle techniques and were very disciplined. They were almost born for battle. Even legendary wizards would find it difficult to kill them in one go. Now that they were in an environment like the land of the dead, their recovery speed was increased. If a legendary wizard encountered such a situation, it would be difficult to deal with these death knights. However, they encountered Su Luan, who had already surpassed the high-grade legends and became the lowest-grade astral explorer. The number of legends who died in his hands was more than 2 hands, let alone these death knights who had yet to reach the legendary level. Su Len waved his storm battle halberd and rushed up in an instant. Dazzling lightning struck the undead knight at the front with the halberd. Endless lightning exploded at this moment, and the powerful lightning directly tore the undead knight's armor apart. A large amount of black death energy quickly dissipated like melting snow. The sharp blade of the halberd directly cut the undead knight in half along with its weapon. Even the undead warhorse under it was covered in lightning. Su Len was very fast, and the storm battle halberd was at full power. Dazzling lightning swept across the area, and the undead knights that rushed up could not fight back at all under Sullen's attack. More than a dozen undead knights were quickly covered in lightning. The endless lightning dissipated, and all of the undead knights turned into a pile of bones. In addition to these, there were more than a dozen high-level soul crystals. What a treasure land! I got more than a dozen high-level soul crystals in such a short time. It's faster than the abyss. Su Len put away the soul crystals and continued to walk deeper into the secret realm. This secret realm was unexpectedly desolate. The soil beneath his feet seemed to have been contaminated by the power of death, turning into a sickly grayish white. This was a sign that the soil had completely lost its nutrients. In the depths of the secret realm, a dense power of death circled around. That should be the true place where the undead lord was sealed. After dealing with the undead knights, the rest of the journey was very quiet. No other undead creatures appeared, which was obviously very abnormal. After all, this was a land of the dead, and the surroundings were so clean that there was not even a ghost. Su Len cast a defensive spell on himself and quickly advanced toward the central area. After walking for a quarter of an hour, a palace made of black rocks appeared in the distance. The construction of the palace was very grand, and the entire palace was made of huge rocks. Stone pillars more than a meter in diameter supported a huge dome. The entire palace was similar to the Parthenon temple in his previous life. It looked very spectacular. Although it had been there for several millennia, the palace was still very well preserved. At this moment, the entire palace was shrouded in an evil energy field. The runic array that was originally used to seal the palace had been infected by this evil energy field and was on the verge of collapse. Meanwhile, the palace was shrouded in an almost corporeal death energy. Sulan extended his left hand and made a grabbing motion toward the palace. Dazzling lightning suddenly appeared, and the power of lightning directly broke through the evil energy field. The lightning flashed, and in the next second, Sulan had already entered the palace. The palace was empty, as if everything had been taken away when it was sealed. A large number of runes were engraved on the floor under his feet. The patterns that Sulan had thought were patterns on the walls were actually runes. These runes and the runes under his feet formed a runic array. The palace was completely a prison. After passing through the corridor, Sulan arrived at the center of the palace. Soon, a figure covered in a black robe appeared before him. His body was emitting a shocking death energy, and an evil energy field spread out from his body. He had a ferocious and twisted face. Under the corrosion of the death energy, his flesh had already dried up, leaving only some dry skin clinging to his face, making him look like a skeleton. His 2 arms had turned into sharp claws, and they were emitting a thick black gas and a plague aura. They looked ferocious and terrifying. When Sulan appeared, he slowly raised his head, and his eyes flashed with a strange red light. He stared at Sulan and muttered, "Soul." Flesh. The sharp claws suddenly disappeared and reappeared in front of Sulan in an instant, grabbing at him fiercely. They carried a shocking death energy, and the sharp claws actually appeared in front of Sulan through space. Bam! Lightning exploded, and the dazzling power of lightning spread out. The monster's sharp claws were directly blown apart, and the death energy on them was also blown away. However, before Sulan could catch his breath, another sharp claw appeared in front of Sulan and instantly hit the energy barrier in front of Sulan. The originally sturdy energy barrier instantly flashed with lightning, and the power of lightning and death continued to clash. Accompanied by the lightning, Sulan's storm battle halberd swept across, and with a loud clang, the sharp claws were directly sent flying. Flesh. Fresh blood and flesh. I'm going to swallow you. The undead lord in front of him still maintained his human form, and his expression was blank and empty. However, there was a palpitating sense of fear. Shock. An evil spiritual light instantly exploded, and Sulan's mind was shaken. A sense of fear rose in his heart, but in an instant, this fear disappeared without a trace. Sulan's toughness and soul resistance were extraordinarily high, and on top of that, his iron will was at the legendary level. The fear shock of the undead lord in front of him was not enough to hurt him. Thunder slash. Sulan's body was covered in lightning, and he directly activated the thunder territory. The evil energy force field that was originally surrounding him was directly broken by the thunder territory, and a powerful lightning energy filled the surrounding space. The dazzling lightning smashed down fiercely, and the storm battle halberd instantly hit the undead lord. Lightning scattered in all directions, and a series of sizzling sounds were heard. The power of lightning and death were constantly being worn down. The undead lord was directly sent flying by Sulan's huge force. Ah! The rich power of death instantly exploded, and completely obliterated the power of lightning on its body. This attack was not ineffective, and the power of lightning was still very damaging to it. The shriveled and terrifying face of the undead lord in front of him was scorched black by the power of lightning, and his eyes, nose, and mouth could no longer be seen. Then, an even larger and more twisted figure appeared from its body. It was an extremely ugly soul, and countless human faces appeared on the soul. They kept appearing and disappearing, and waves of soul wails and screams were heard. Tentacles made completely of the power of death kept appearing, and with the spread of the evil territory, a large number of tentacles of evil energy fiercely whipped at Sulan in an instant. Soul-binding zombie demon. Su Len finally remembered the name of this undead lord. This was a soul-binding zombie demon. Boom! A loud thunder sounded, and then countless bolts of lightning exploded from Sullen's body. All the tentacles of evil energy all turned into black gas after hitting the lightning. The lightning and the power of death collided quickly. At this moment, a pitch-black energy spike suddenly appeared behind Su Len, and then it instantly broke through the energy shield on Sullen's body, and was about to penetrate his back in the next moment. Spell sequence activate. Flash. Thunderstorm. Spear of lightning. The moment the energy shield broke, Sullen's body flashed, and his whole body disappeared in an instant. Then, a bolt of lightning fell from the sky, and instantly hit the soul-binding zombie demon. Then, another spear of lightning shot out, and instantly shot at the soul-binding zombie demon. But at this moment, the soul-binding zombie demon flashed with evil energy, and the next second, it appeared beside Su Len, and its pair of ferocious claws grabbed at him again. Bang! 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 Without thinking, Su Len quickly attacked with the Storm War Halberd. The Storm War Halberd carried the powerful power of lightning and kept attacking. The soul-binding zombie demon's ability was very strange, but its strength was far lower than Sullen's. But this time, it wanted to fight Su Len in close combat. When it came to close combat, Su Len was not afraid of anyone. Endless lightning enveloped Sullen's body, and flashes of lightning kept flashing. The Storm War Halberd kept hacking at the soul-binding zombie demon's body. The soul-binding zombie demon's shriveled body kept retreating, and the lightning kept entangling it. Soon, the shroud on the soul-binding zombie demon's body was torn apart, and finally, after another heavy hack, the shroud on the soul-binding zombie demon's body was completely broken. Under the dazzling lightning, it instantly shattered into countless pieces, and the body under the shroud appeared before Sullen's eyes. It was a completely shriveled human corpse. In the battle just now, the flesh had been torn apart, revealing the black bones inside. Su Len waved the Storm War Halberd in his hand, creating a series of phantoms. The Storm War Halberd seemed to have turned into a dozen at this moment, and the continuous attacks forced the soul-binding zombie demon's big sister to retreat. Roar! The soul-binding zombie demon roared, and a strong evil energy erupted from its body, causing Sullen's attack to pause for a moment. Taking advantage of this opportunity, the soul-binding zombie demon instantly activated its teleportation ability, trying to distance itself from Su Len. But just as it disappeared, Su Len also activated Flash and chased after it again. The dazzling lightning lit up the entire palace. The palace was not big. The soul-binding zombie demon kept flashing and attacking, and Su Len kept flashing and chasing after it. Both of them teleported very quickly, and the entire space seemed to be covered by lightning. You're tuning in to the Unparalleled SwordWill YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.